Vinnie Politan, thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. This is going to be a fascinating hour as we take a look at the boy in the box trial case that we are covering. And we're going to look at it in a couple ways that we haven't done before. And I want to begin by talking about Timothy Ferriter, the defendant, the father on the stand. This guy has been stoic inside the courtroom. I mean, look at the picture we're looking at there. I mean, he about 98% of the time, that's kind of how he looks. And, you know, when you're accused of a crime and you're in a courtroom, you know the jury's watching, etc. Defense attorneys try to tell you not to show anything. And it's been difficult for me personally to read this guy, to understand this guy. Now, the jury in the same room with him may have a little bit of a different take. There may be little things that he's doing. I don't know. But it's been tough because you don't get to see any sort of reaction or emotion or anything from him. It's that look, you know, the perfectly gelled hair, the suit, and just that look that he has in the courtroom. The most stoic of any defendant in recent times here on Court TV. Now, the other thing that sort of adds to all of that is that he chose and remained silent. Now, of course, you're allowed to do that. We understand that at Court TV. You understand that at home. I mean, it's part of our constitutional rights. We have the right to remain silent. We don't have to prove a thing if we're accused of a crime. He's been accused of a crime, doesn't have to prove anything. It's up to state to prove everything beyond any and all reasonable doubt, or every element of every crime that he's been charged with. But his silence, when you combine that with his stoic presence in the courtroom, doesn't give you an indication of who this guy is. Like, who is he? Who is Timothy Ferriter? What is this guy really like? We know what he's like in moments on the video with his son. The jury gets to see it. We get to hear it. Not great moments. The defense played other moments that they thought were more normal, but you don't get the true. What hasn't come through to me, and through his silence, I think it added to that, is that I feel like he's almost not humanized. Like, he cold, distant, and not like a real person. And again, it's nothing that he has to prove. It's nothing that he's compelled to say. It's about the evidence and the facts, but at the end of the day, you're judging a man. And here you're trying to judge a man for why he did what he did. Like, we know what he did. He had this box built. We know that he yelled at his son and other things like that. But the real question for the jury is why this was being done. Was it out of a place of utter frustration? And I'm not getting that from him firsthand, so it's difficult. And I was surprised that he chose to remain silent. So he remains silent. He's stoic in the court, but what is his body language saying in all of this? Both his reactions to testimony in the courtroom and things that are being played for the jury. Is there any little indicator there that tells us how this is making him feel? You know, the slightest movement, because I haven't been able to pick that up. That's why we've got an expert coming in tonight. Also going to take a listen to his voice when he does speak and he does yell at his son. What does that indicate? Does it indicate a place of where that's coming from? Because to me, again, that's what this case is all about. The other part is, and this is real, when a jury is judging someone, you know, do they like him? Right? In the Johnny Depp case, great example. The jury didn't like Amber Heard, but they liked Johnny Depp. And that was really a result of who they were inside the courtroom. And some of the recordings, obviously, as well. But it's really who they were in the courtroom, day in and day out. He hasn't exposed himself to that. So I don't know if this jury's going to like him based upon what they've seen and heard. And he hasn't, and he chose not to testify. Again, his choice, his right. But will this jury like him? And who is Timothy Ferriter? Let's see what we can figure out through the body language. Joining us tonight in Alexandria, Virginia, body language expert, New York Times best-selling author of You Can't Lie to Me, Janine Driver is with us. Janine, great to see you tonight. This is like a difficult task I have for you tonight because you're looking at a man in a courtroom who is extremely stoic, I'm not picking up on anything. And then we're going to have some recordings where you don't even get to see him because there's his minor son is in the video, so we're not permitted to show it. So I know it's a difficult task tonight, but I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Absolutely. I'm ready. I even have notes tonight because this is challenging. But like a friend of mine, Frank Marsh, says at the FBI Behavioral Unit, everything says something.
Okay. So we're going to begin. This is Timothy Ferriter. This is the Ring video recording. We aren't going to see it. The jury did, but we'll hear his voice. And this is right after his adopted son has had a tantrum and has broken some things in his room. So after that happens, this is Tim Ferriter speaking with his son. Let's listen.
Oh, you ripped it up? You ripped it off the wall? Yeah. Good job. I won the bet. I didn't think it'd last 3 weeks. Who are you looking for attention from? No one. Oh, well, somebody, because you wouldn't do it. Oh, it's so sad. So you're mad because asked you about your tablet, about your Chrome pad, your Chromebook? Yeah. But you've been stealing and lying and running away and calling yourself Richard. You're lucky you have anything. Give me a break. You want to get serious with me? Stand up. Stand up. You want to get serious with me? You're going down that pathway again. You got kicked out of basis. You're lucky we left because you weren't going to be let back. So are you going to do that here too? No. You're acting like a here. This is jerk. But you're a big tough guy. You're going by the police. You're going to lie to the police. Tell some guy you're Richard. So I'm going to talk real frank to you. This language is not used out there in front of the baby and the girls. But you're a tough guy, right? You're going to break I mean, break right? I don't give a Let's break Let's break all this I don't need it. Let's rip it off the wall. So let's talk tough guy, huh? Let's talk. Let's get real here. I don't need this though. I got stuff that I got to do in my life to pay for your food and your housing and your clothes and your sisters and your brother that I don't need your extra that you're just asking for attention for. When you got a lot of gifts that you have that other people don't have, and you on them. And you're mad because thinks I'm doing something. Hell yes! Because you do it a bunch of times. That's why. And I don't have time to track it all because I expect you to get better, but you don't. You do the same over and over and over and over and over again.
All right, Janine, there's two parts to this, right? There's his voice in the recording, and then there's him sitting in the courtroom. Tell me what you saw.
Well, of course, he's trying to intimidate. I don't think you need to be a body language expert to hear that with that raised tone and pitch of voice. Voice is really important. I think we'll talk about that quite a bit tonight. What I want to talk about here is early on in this particular clip, Vinny, and you at home, we see Tim look down left. Down left is either in one of two things, depends if he's right-handed or left-handed. It's either internal dialogue where he's having a conversation with himself, or it's deep emotion and he's processing that emotion. Not only in this clip, but in other clips, if you're watching this case, you're going to see Tim occasionally do this. He pulls his mouth back just really subtly for a micro expression of fear. And you may not see fear like we traditionally might see fear, like really big and pulled back, but this subtle fear, what's happening is he's sucking in air, I believe, in the corners of his mouth. And this is a major, reliable indicator of concern, anxiety, and fear. And so he thinks he's not giving it away, but you'll see him There's another clip where he talks, the mother is talking about stealing candy. I don't know if we're getting into that, but you again, in court, we see Tim do this little grimace. That grimace is a micro expression of fear in a 15th of a second. You can't not see it once you know what to look for. And then in the auditory that we're hearing in the audio, that increase in tone and pitch of voice, that is actually a way to get attention, and it does not serve us well when reducing conflict with people. A hostage negotiator, Jim Kavanaugh, my hostage negotiator mentor, didn't scream and yell at David Koresh holding people hostage at Waco, Texas. He said, "Hey, David, everyone out here says you're a man of your word and you could be trusted." Clearly, this guy doesn't have the skills on how to deal with conflict. I always say, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? Clearly, in this situation, he's looking to be right, but clearly not effective. If it was effective, then this would have been the end of it, and there would have been no other problems with his son, right, with listening. There's a lot happening here, even though it might not seem like there is.
So when you say you see expressions of fear, so he's hearing this, do you think the fear is, oh my goodness, this does not sound good, this is really bad news for me?
Hey, well, this is the deal, Vinny, and you at home. We don't know what the catalyst is. We can spot these micro expressions: happiness, sadness, fear, surprise, anger, contempt, and disgust. Quite frankly, I'm looking for contempt, and I haven't seen it yet in the clip that you've shown me. But without a doubt, it's a couple things, right? It's either, boy, it doesn't sound good. It could be that. It could also be, I'm going to end up in jail. I mean, he's up for what, 40 years, Vinny? So he didn't take the plea deal. And so we don't know what's inside of his head, but for sure we can spot the fear, tiny micro expression, and when those happen, they're trying to mask them. And here's the special thing: body language shows up to 5 seconds before thought. So we know he's scared before his brain knows he's scared. So there's that 5-second delay. That's why it's so critical for us to decode body language, because we get a 5-second advantage. Think about the military or athletes. Does 5 seconds make a difference? Yeah,
big difference. Big
here,
difference.
there's fear. There is fear.
Okay, let's move to Tracy Ferriter, because she's there as well inside the courtroom. She's been watching the trial in the gallery. She's going to have her own trial after this. Here she is listening to, again, another one of these Ring camera recordings. Let's watch.
What do you need? Do you have pajamas? Are those them right there? Do you hear me? Oh, here we go. Back to this where you can't talk. You're a middle school boy. You want to do all these things. You want to do chess. You want to do things. But you can't talk because you got caught being dishonest. Okay, well, that's fine. Guess I'll just keep giving you more chances. Every day, new chance for even though doesn't care, he doesn't want to be nice to anyone. Oh, let's let do this. Oh, let's let me bring some food because I think he's going to have a good night. Oh, let me do everything for okay. Oh, can't talk because he got in trouble because he got caught. It's like, give me a break. Start owning up to what you're doing and then try to fix the problem like we keep telling you.
Janine, the only thing I'm seeing a lot of eye blinks. I don't know if it was an extraordinary number of them, but
Yeah.
What did you see?
Well, the blink rate is 3 times the normal rate that we're seeing here, which indicates a spike in stress and anxiety. And something's happening here. We're seeing dimpling of her chin. And when we see this, Elizabeth Holmes did this too. I don't know if you remember this interview. Elizabeth Holmes, who's now, I think she's in jail as well, for scamming the public on a blood test that could test multiple diseases. Elizabeth Holmes was once asked, tell me a secret you're keeping. And she thought 9 seconds and then said, I don't have many secrets. Of course, she had the biggest secret of all, but that dimpling of the chin, we see that here in trial on the face, the corners of the mouth are down. This is sadness. The interesting thing is I always look at the forehead. It's an accurate indicator of stress and anxiety. And we're seeing these what are called Einstein lines across the forehead. This indicates she knows a lot of information about different topics. And those are popping up. Normally, if I want to decode those, and I've done this with you before, Vinny. I know you have three real deep Einstein lines. So right here, I have to ask someone to do that. But we have that happening at play here. What does this indicate? This indicates she is sad and stressed right out of the gate here in this clip. And you can see that. And it's interesting, if you look at her left eyebrow, our left hand, if you think about our left hand is where you put your wedding ring, the left hand is your personal side. And here on her personal side, she has this like crooked eyebrow a little bit. It comes up and it's angled. These are people that in her personal life, what's in it for me? What's the angle? So right here, when we're going back into the recording that she's hearing, this is all about her. This is all about her, not the way to handle conflict. Forget about the box itself, but how we talk to our children. You know, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective? I like to say, I did a TED talk on this, how to think like a hostage negotiator to get what you want. So paying attention to the language we're using if you want to get better results. And she, by the way, and I don't know if we have this clip, she uses such language as, you stole, why would you steal the chocolate, steal. In law enforcement, and you may know this, Vinny, I'm sure you do, it's called minimizing language. Is we would never say, did you steal something? In law enforcement, we would say, did you take something that didn't belong to you? We wouldn't say, did you rape someone? We would say, did you force yourself on someone? So here as a parent, she's not using any minimizing language. She's just going for the jugular. And this poor kid, man, doesn't have a chance. You know, she's doing this circle. When we hear this figure eight, the same stuff that's being said over and over and over again, that's high stress and anxiety. So even in the moment of her confronting her adopted son, she's under that stress and out of control.
Let's take a listen. You mentioned the teenage boy. We have some of his testimony. Here he is describing the box and being in the box. He testified, again, we can't show him, but we can clearly hear his voice. He's in the room testifying where his parents are.
To me, being locked in a room, it's dehumanizing. It's almost as bad as genocide. It's saddening to abuse a child that was just acting like a child, never thinking of what an adult would think to do to a child that would succumb his or her efforts in daily life to succeed, suffering from emotional pain, suffering, trauma.
All right, how about his voice and Timothy Ferriter's reaction?
Well, Timothy, let's start there. He opens his mouth and takes a breath in right there. That's to reduce that stress that's happening for him in that moment. He also looks away. And again, it depends on if he's right-handed or left-handed. He either goes emotional or self-talk. But I want you to notice, if you just saw just a second ago, he's nodding his head yes here. And it's very, very subtle. You can begin to notice these things. Is a head nod in a direction, is that a solid indicator? For me, not so much, but nevertheless, we're putting all these indicators, especially when we don't have a lot of low-hanging fruit here to analyze Timothy. So we do see that, though, nodding yes going along. We saw this with Roger Clemens when Roger Clemens was asked by Mike Wallace, hey, did you ever cheat in the game of baseball? Did you take steroids? Because, you know, Brian McNamee said this, and well, this is being recanted. I mean, retold, not recanted, to Roger Clemens. Roger Clemens is doing these subtle head nods, yes, and we see that here with Tim Ferriter. Now, as for the son, boy, he is articulate. This young man, for what he's gone through, is really quite extraordinary. How he's able to articulate. He's demonstrating emotional intelligence to say, you know, hey, how about have some empathy? You know, put yourself in my shoes here. I think that he's for me, very impressive. And if he ever wants to take any of my training, yeah, he can have a scholarship to anything he wants, because my heart goes out to him. This father reminds me, do you remember RoboCop or whatever with Arnold Schwarzenegger? It was like the cop that was like the robot that was like really, you know, like serious. Like that's this aspect.
That's Timothy Ferriter. That is.
Yeah, that's Timothy.
We are out of time for tonight. Janine Driver, appreciate you coming on. Great insight as always. Thanks so much.
Nice to see you, my friend.
All right, folks, when we come back, we're going to talk about a question that the jury is going to have to wrestle with, which is this level of discipline. Was it reasonable? Was it unreasonable? Plus, coming up next hour. In Palm Beach County, Florida, the boy in the box trial, Timothy Ferriter, accused of abusing his adopted son by locking him in an 8x8 box in the garage. Tonight, we take a listen to the closing arguments as we wait for the jury's verdict.
Over the course of the time that was in Jupiter, Florida in December 2021 through January 2022, he was subjected to treatment by his parents, including his father, Timothy Ferriter, that was cruel, heinous, and malicious.
There's a tragic outcome in this case.
Civil trial that is the focus of the Netflix documentary Take Care of Maya.
How a misdiagnosis tore their family apart.
They continue to accuse Jack and Beata of being child abusers.
Jack called me and said Beata just hung herself.
Is the hospital they're suing responsible for what happened?
The Take Care of Maya trial. Trial coverage weekday mornings at 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
I slept in an 8x8 room in the garage.
Okay. Was that room built into the garage?
It was built inside the garage.
Inside the garage?
Yes.
Who built that? Or who had it built?
Timothy hired a contractor to build it in December of 2021.
Right, and how do you know that?
Because I was kept in their closet and I overheard the conversation of them having to build it. The floor was concrete, but I used these little 16 by 16 inch mats of carpet to put down on the floor, so it wasn't so hard.
So this is the victim in the case describing the box, and this is really what the case is about. Yeah, there's the screaming, the abuse, but it's really, when push comes, it's about this box. And last night we talked about the impact that the box could have on someone who suffers from RAD, this reactive attachment disorder, right? Tonight I want to talk about, well, is this an unreasonable step for a parent to take who's attempting to discipline their child? The reason I say that is because if you look at the Florida jury instruction that we expect this jury to consider in this case, it is not a crime for a parent to impose reasonable physical discipline on a child for misbehavior under the circumstances, even though physical injury resulted from the discipline. So last night we established that this is not good for someone who suffers from this, right? So there may be some injury, and likely was injury, in making his condition worse. But the question is, was it reasonable or unreasonable? Let's have a discussion. Joining us in North Carolina, reactive attachment disorder parent advocate and author of Reactive Attachment Disorder, The Essential Guide for Parents, Kerry Williams is with us. Also joining us in Greenville, South Carolina, licensed therapist, Dr. Roger Rhodes. And also joining us in Los Angeles, California, forensic psychiatrist, trial expert, witness, and columnist, Dr. Carol Lieberman. And I understand this is something we might not all agree about whether or not it's reasonable, and this is something the jury will have to consider, though, in looking at this case. So, Kerry, from your perspective, the actions taken by these parents under these circumstances, despite the fact that it may have made his RAD or his condition worse, was it reasonable for these parents to take this action under the circumstances, from your perspective?
So having locks on the outside of the door and not having a window, that's obviously a fire hazard. So that's totally over the line. And that doesn't really account for even just the fact there's also additional emotional and mental issues that can be caused by that. What I will say is that when your child is in residential treatment facilities, they absolutely contain and restrain kids. I've seen it. It's awful. It's very traumatic, even for someone to watch it, much less have it happen to you. I think they usually do it more safely than they would do it in a home like this. But I think what we have to really understand is that for a parent to take care of a 14-year-old boy who's getting knives, who's threatening their siblings, we really have to be realistic about our expectations and what the limits are of caregivers, right? So at this point, when they decided that they needed to contain him in a box, obviously that was not a good choice. And what we needed to do is get him help much, much earlier. And at that point, they should have put him in a residential treatment facility where you have line of sight supervision, you have trained staff, you can control access to weapons. So I just really hope that this case makes people realize that parents who are caring for kids who are violent and dangerous really need effective treatments and solutions, then that there aren't easy answers. This was not the correct answer, but there are not easy answers for parents who are dealing with kids who have suicidal and homicidal ideations and are dangerous.
Dr. Roger Rhodes, your thoughts about the actions taken by these parents? And we're looking at, is it reasonable, unreasonable under the circumstances that they were dealing with?
Unreasonable. It was poor parenting. The parents were underwater. They needed to go to professionals, people who are set up in a situation that's set up for the best health of both of them, for the parents and for the children. But what this really seems to me to be an issue of parental pride, not being able to say that I'm overwhelmed. But I understood where people say, well, if you can't put them in prison, create a prison where you are, and it'll teach them what prison is like. But that's poor parenting, and that's not using the professional availability that's in their area to best help this child.
Dr. Carol Lieberman, how do you see this? And again, explaining what the defense is arguing here is that the intent was not criminal. They're disciplining, they're trying to keep them safe. And then the question for the jury will be, is this unreasonable under the circumstances? And part of the circumstances were they did seek some help. They didn't follow through totally on all of that, but they did, they did some, and clearly not enough. They've conceded and admitted that what the choices they made were wrong. But let's get back to the question for this jury again: reasonable versus an unreasonable choice under the circumstances, regardless of the impact it may have on the young man's condition.
Well, I'm going to make it unanimous and say unreasonable. The key here is what they did for the benefit of their son or for their own benefit. And it's clear that it was for their own benefit. A lot of the things that they did, besides confining him in a box, was torture, was cruel, was purposely cruel. They were angry at him. They were disappointed that he didn't turn out the way that they had hoped when they adopted him. And they were taking out this disappointment and this anger on him. And, it's fascinating. The one thing that is not good for the defense, I mean, there are a lot of things, but one thing in particular is when the boy himself said in his testimony, let's see. He said, I don't have a bad image of Tim and Tracy. They made a mistake. It's time to forgive and move on. So the jury is going to be looking at that and thinking, well, maybe it was just bad parenting. He doesn't blame them, so why should we blame him? But, the thing is, you have to look at why he's saying that. And the answer is, even kids who are abused in all kinds of horrible ways, and of course this is one good example of it, the parents are the only parents that he knows. I mean, other than whatever happened in the first 7 months. But then he had the orphanage. And then here are parents who, adopted him, showed some kind of supposed love, caring, took him in any case. And he doesn't want to lose that. He doesn't want to be abandoned. So I think he's saying that, it's time to forgive and so on, because he doesn't want to lose his father or his mother to prison. He wants it's better than nobody in his mind.
All right, guests are staying with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the things that the jury did not see and did not hear during this trial. A Florida father accused of locking his son in a box in the garage with a bed a bucket, and a camera.
He was locked in a room for hours at a time.
Police say this abuse went unnoticed for years.
There are ring videos that the state provided of the child lying.
He faces up to 40 years.
I'm not sure they're going to be able to justify it.
What's going on in this house?
The Boy in a Box trial. Live coverage weekday mornings at 8/7 Central on Court TV.
In 2019, while living in Havasu, Arizona, Tracy and Tim had their last and youngest child. And at that point, they are fearful. Are a little bit older. They're about 10, 11 years old. And is coming in as an infant. And at this point, had been hurting other kids at school. He had been engaging in dangerous behaviors. He's walking around at night, and they did not know if an infant could be safe with in the house.
That's really the basis of the defense case here for Timothy Ferriter. But like in any other trial, there are things the defense wanted in front of this jury that were not permitted. Sometimes it's things that the prosecution wants. Because of the rules of evidence, the jury doesn't hear everything. So right now, we're going to take a look at some of the things that the jury did not hear about during the course of this trial. Let's bring in Court TV legal correspondent Julie Janae joining us tonight outside the courthouse. Great to see you, Julia. So what else do we know that the jury didn't hear about the victim's alleged behavior problems?
Well, Vinny, we have some new information on that front. There was a recent filing by the defense, a motion for the judge to reconsider all of his rulings in this case. And we've heard some of the things that the defense has tried to get in. It's almost like they've just been pushing this envelope, but there's a lot of stuff in the envelope that the judge says is not coming in this case. So in that motion to reconsider, there's a reference to some things that have happened since this incident, since the police got involved and since the Ferriter children were removed from their care. And they mention in that filing that is public now with the court that there's a facility that the child victim in this case, RF, is in and that or has been in after being Baker acted. That's something here in Florida that's a temporary institutional hold for someone who's exhibiting signs of being a danger to themselves or others. And that while he was in that facility, all of the objects were taken from the room and taken from him, any of his personal effects, because they didn't want him to cause any harm to himself. So similar, I'm sure the defense would want to argue in front of this jury to what was going on inside of that enclosure, inside of the Ferriter home. Here's a look at more of those listed behaviors that was in a letter that was filed early on in this case by another attorney who represented the defense early on, Nellie King. She wrote this trying to convince the judge that they had a misunderstanding. The court had a misunderstanding of this case, and it included an attack on a female relative, a sister, by fracturing her shoulder, pushing her so hard that it fractured her shoulder. Also, in another instance, pushing her face into a marble windowsill, torturing animals. It goes on to say that he also brought knives to school and drew pictures of artillery. That's something we really haven't heard in this trial. That he roams the house at night, terrorizing others. That he stole money out of a collection plate at church, and that he fantasizes about killing people. But there have been times that the defense really tried to get in some of that information, even though they got an immediate objection from the state. Here's a listen to attorney Priya Murad attempting that on one of these instances.
At no point did the parents report that there was issues with the child hurting animals, correct?
To that doctor?
To Dr. Rockenbarker.
Right, to that doctor, no.
And I think that you mentioned that that was something that may have existed in this case, but isn't it true that the only issue that he ever had with an animal is when he overfed a dog?
No, he had been riding a bicycle and was riding the bicycle into the dog.
Okay, so he hit the dog with a bicycle.
So that was actually cross-examination. That was the state asking the defense expert witness whether or not there was actually this torturing of animals. So it seemed to take the sting out of what the defense was wanting to get in. Here's another instance, this time of the defense attorney, Priya Murad, talking about the stolen laptop that she said the child victim used to then look at some disturbing images.
He stole another student's laptop, hacked into it, and looked up women getting run over by trains.
Sustained.
That happened about 3 or 4 times in that moment, Vinny, and that's happened over and over again in this trial, this attempt to try and get more information in, but the court has said, no, this is psychiatric information, it's privileged, plus we don't want to get into too much of the bad character of the victim here.
How about the victim running away?
Yeah, that happened after he had been in Jupiter for about 2 months. So he had been in Florida for 2 months. That's when his family built him another box, so to speak, inside of the garage. And after 6 weeks there is when he left. We saw him on the video in the courtroom where his younger brother happened to open the door, and it seems like his parents didn't know, and that's when he was able to leave and never return. That's when police started investigating a missing persons case, and that eventually led them, once they found the child victim, they were able to get his account. He let them know, hey, this is how I am living. I'm in this enclosure. And he also said he didn't feel like he was loved. They went back to the house to get more information from his family, and that's when they discovered that structure in the garage.
Julie, Janae, at the courthouse, I know we're going to speak some more. Stand by. I want to bring in our experts, Kerry Williams, Dr. Roger Rhodes, Dr. Carol Lieberman, and ask them, based upon some of this other information, this is information the jury's not going to consider, but we all can consider it. Does it change your opinion at all about this case, hearing some of the stuff here that the jury has not heard? Kerry Williams, I'll begin with you.
Those are very typical behaviors for children with reactive attachment disorder. I speak to hundreds of parents, and they report the same types of behaviors. I think what is really significant about what the reporter just said is that when the child is in residential treatment, they are isolating them in a room. They're taking away everything that they have. And you need to remember that this is also when they have staff people around. They have cameras. They have all sorts of tools. They have lots of things that parents do not have, and that is the best solution that they have. And that absolutely is the only solution that they have. I've seen that myself. And so we need to think about, why don't we have better solutions in RTF and then give those solutions to parents? But why are we expecting parents to have a better solution than what they have in residential treatment facilities?
Dr. Roger Rhodes?
Yes, sir.
So based upon some of this other information that the jury's not considering, does it change the equation for you at all about the circumstances that this family was in?
No, it reinforces what I believe. You know, there's a reason we don't operate on ourselves, because we are not licensed to do that, or that you operate on a relative. What's going on is the fact that they're trying to do what a residential treatment center with qualified people and medically safe and liable can do well, and they have no business doing it.
Dr. Carol Lieberman?
Yes, it comes down to that yes, I know that they made some attempts, aborted attempts, to get some kind of help, but they never followed through with anything. And yes, at the very, if they would have had to bring the child to a facility like that, that is, as they've been, your other guests have been saying, that is in combination with therapy. Yes, you want to take objects away from him that he could hurt himself with or hurt other people, but in the meantime, you're also giving him intensive therapy, and that's not what they were giving him. And he said, he ran away because he felt he wasn't loved. But at the same time, again, I go back to the fact that the jury is going to consider his wanting to forgive them. And that's going to be, there are lots of things against, that the parents did wrong. But if the son is going to forgive them, that's going to be something that the jury might be stuck on.
Dr. Roger Rhodes, what kind of life can this young man expect moving forward?
If he gets proper treatment, he's going to have a regular life, okay? That he's going to learn boundaries, and he's going to learn how to operate, and he's going to be, they're going to intensely focus him on his mental needs. And none of that's going to happen in the system he's in now.
Kerry Williams, what advice would you have for these parents now? Let's say they're found guilty or not guilty, but they're out and about and they're living their lives in a few years from now. What advice would you have for them?
If they're out and about with their child back with them, is that
not with not with the adopted child. He'll be out of the picture, but just trying to get back into life and attempting, my guess, to have some sort of relationship with your other 3 children.
Mm-hmm. So I think with kids like this, I think personally that this is probably too late for him to get intensive therapy. It's very difficult to get. He should have gotten it years and years ago. So I think chances are that this child is going to have a very hard time going into adulthood. And I think that the parents, if all of these allegations of violence are true, the parents need to be on good terms with him. They need to try to have a positive relationship with them, even if it's fairly shallow, because they need to think about protecting themselves, and they need to think about protecting their other children, and they need to think about practical ways that they might be able to help him at his age so that he can function in society. And, he probably has missed school, I imagine, and things like that. So he's going to need help getting a job, getting very simple, basic things for a lot of us.